Yesterday afternoon, having shown no sign of doing so 18 hours earlier or in the 18 preceding months, Todd Barclay tendered his resignation effective in September. He didn't do so last year as Glenys Dixon resigned from his electorate office, as Stuart Davey resigned as his electorate chairman, as Bill English became aware of a secret dictaphone recording, even speaking to the police about it, and the police conducted an investigation that Todd Barclay himself declined to assist. But he did step down yesterday. Why? What's changed? Todd Barclay won't talk to us, although the invitation remains open. But today Bill English was visiting a drug and alcohol rehabilitation centre in West Auckland, and afterwards he held a media conference. So I went.
Good morning.
Good morning. Prime Minister, in February of last year, you texted Stuart Davey about Todd Barclay, and I quote, "He left a dictaphone running that picked up all conversations in the office." Why did he survive then and go yesterday? What's changed?
Well, that was in the context of an employment dispute. While now there is an understanding that was potentially an offence, at the time that was not the case.
So you spoke to the police about it in April, so that was absolutely being treated as a possible offence.
Well, that was later when there had been a police complaint made. But in the early stages of this particular argument, there was an employment dispute going on. There was a settlement of that employment dispute and a confidentiality agreement around it. And to all intents and purposes, that looked to be the end of the matter.
Isn't the thing that has changed that this is now embarrassing the National Party, that at the time, last year, this was behind closed doors. Now it is very much in public, and that's why Todd Barclay had to go.
Well, the reason, he's made a brave decision for a young guy in politics, decided that the position he got himself into was untenable, that it didn't work as a distraction from the government's focus on the issues that matter to the public, rather than the internal debate about what he'd done or might do.
But if it's untenable now, why was it tenable in February, March and April of last year? Why was it tenable when he was being reselected as the candidate for Clutha Southland? What has suddenly made it untenable?
Well, in our party, the selection process is totally devolved. It is totally the responsibility of the electorate. The actions I had taken were to pass the information I had to the electorate chair. The electorate chair is the person who runs the selection, which occurred actually quite some time later. I made a decision not to be part of this election. I had no formal role in it. I couldn't be a voter or a delegate as part of it, and came to the view that the former MP becoming involved in this election, particularly one that was contested in this way, would probably polarise it in a way that was worse. But all the information was available. I mean, these issues had been canvassed publicly in the media, certainly known by all the delegates, because among the delegates were people who, as I understand it, were part of this whole process.
Prime Minister, I'm struck though, and all you say is true, but I'm struck by the fact that that is a micro-semantics argument. I'm really interested in, did you regard Todd Barclay's behaviour as tenable, as acceptable, as appropriate in February, March and April of last year? And if you didn't, why didn't you speak up against it?
Well, it wasn't acceptable behaviour in the sense of it led to an employment dispute including with people who'd worked for me, who I regarded as quite competent. That was resolved then in the correct way, which was between the employer and the employee, the employer being Parliamentary Services, and the employee, and and then subject to a confidentiality agreement. So my advice to him was that wasn't good behaviour. In fact, to all the parties involved, that they could behave better.
What wasn't good behaviour? Secretly recording conversations in the office?
Well, there was a number of allegations around, and those have all been discussed publicly. But as someone who was not party to all that, the resolution of the employment dispute seemed at the time to deal with whatever the differences were, and I'm not aware of all the differences, and whatever actions he had taken that weren't acceptable.
So if they dealt with them at the time, why did Todd Barclay go yesterday? I don't understand what's changed. If the employment dispute was resolved satisfactorily at the time, and if you and John Key and other senior members of the National Party saw fit to not tackle Todd Barclay directly about what he had been doing, why did he have to go yesterday?
Well, I disagree with that. This is someone whose actions have been investigated over many months by the police, right? So the information I had was part of the police investigation. The sort of the inference that nothing happened is wrong. There couldn't really be a much more serious process than the one that was initiated by a complaint to the police about the recording, raising a set of issues around offences, which I don't think anyone had occurred to anybody, that there may be some potential offence.
Did it not occur to you when you were speaking to the police?
Well, by the time there was a police complaint, then you could see the possibility that there was an offence. But earlier on, for those who weren't involved, it's hard to know what exactly happened. There was no implication of behaviour that could be an offence. But and nevertheless, whatever was part of the employment dispute, there was a police complaint. The information I had, I made available to the police through there.
Did the police approach you? Did the police approach you, or did you approach the police over this?
Oh no, they approached me. So the actions of Mr. Barclay were dealt with in the context of a police investigation, which is the most serious framework in which the actions of a politician can be investigated.
So if all of that is true, why did he stand down yesterday?
Well, look, in the end, these decisions aren't just legal or just political, they're also personal.
Isn't the difference that he was caught out? Isn't the difference that you have been caught out? Isn't the difference fundamentally that everyone who knew about this was quite content for Todd Barclay to stay until this became explicitly public?
Well, the people who determine whether he stayed in Parliament is his local electorate. And I think that's a pretty important point here that needs to be understood. The caucus, the leadership, the party head office doesn't determine the selections. The candidate is selected only by the local electorate, and the history of that is that interference from outside in that process always leads to trouble. So he had gone through, it's not a matter of people being happy with things not being known. In fact, this whole situation was very well understood in the electorate, as I understand. The piece of information I had been in the hands of the electorate chairman who ran the selection, and had been for many months. So the people reselected Todd Barclay when there'd been a police investigation of the actions which did not come to a conclusion, right? It basically said the investigation's over, we're not laying charges of any sort. In the knowledge of that, then the local National Party selected a candidate. So it was about as transparent and thoroughly investigated a process as you could possibly imagine. In fact, I can't recall a candidate selection that occurred after a police investigation